We're trying to find people who have those different viewpoints so that we can put them together and showcase them agreeing on something. Or not agreeing, but coming to find a common ground.
Get students involved in hearing difficult conversations so that we can have these difficult conversations in our own personal lives with more grace and more compassion.
We're trying to come together to find a solution. And I think that's what politics is lacking at the moment.
Welcome to Pilot Projects, Stories from the Jefferson Trust, brought to you by the Sound on Grounds team at the University of Virginia Library. I'm Jason Evans Groth. I grew up in Indiana. My family moved there when I was 6. All I knew about Indiana up to that point was that it was close to Illinois, people there liked basketball, and it was full of corn. As the classic ad for the Indiana amusement park Indiana Beach said, though, more than corn in Indiana. Indiana is the home of luminous American figures like James Dean, Janet Jackson, and Orville Redenbacher. And also, to my surprise, as a literature-obsessed high school student, Kurt Vonnegut Jr. In high school in Indiana, I would occasionally be a substitute on the debate team. I kept a couple of Vonnegut quotes in my back pocket, especially if I was competing as an extemporaneous speaker. Here's one of them from a letter to a high school student. Quote, "Practice any art, music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming, to find out what's inside you, to make your soul grow," unquote. In other words, Vonnegut told this student to practice becoming. And then another quote, which I would often use when participating in debates about politics, quote, "There's only one rule that I know of, babies. God, you've got to be kind," unquote. At UVA, there's a group of students who are using kindness as they practice becoming to more fruitfully get to the truth about social and political issues. They participate in a club called the Civil Discourse Initiative. Sound on Ground student Sarah Bastinelli and I sat down with two of them. I'll let them introduce themselves.
My name is Sabriya Sheikh, and I study political and social thought. I'm minoring in bioethics, and hopefully I'm minoring in Middle Eastern and South Asian languages and cultures. I work with the Civil Discourse Initiative, and we are working on promoting civil discourse across the university, but we also have our This Is Not a Debate series, which is what we're known for. So that's what I work on as the vice president of CDI.
My name is Christoph Schoer. I am a rising fourth year. I'm majoring in economics and politics with a minor in astronomy, which is for fun. I always joke that that's the one that will get me the job. And at the university, I do a few things. I'm a TA for commercial law. I'm part of the Washington Society, and right now I'm the president of the Civil Discourse Initiative.
We asked Sabriya and Christoph about the goals of the Civil Discourse Initiative, which you'll also hear them refer to as CDI.
The whole idea is that we want to help people learn how to disagree better, not necessarily changing people's minds, but coming together and understanding one another and creating connections across the aisle or just across whatever boundary exists between people.
We're trying to promote meaningful political dialogue in a civil way. We saw that there's a big gap in terms of how people have conversations with each other and the polarization of it. Our job is to try to help people find a common ground and be able to engage meaningfully with each other rather than argue and yell with each other. A lot of the people are interested in politics or are politics majors or are politics adjacent majors. You could say it is politics department coded, but it is something that we want all students to be able to participate in and be a part of, because discourse, like kind that we're trying to promote, is something that everyone should be able to partake in. It's not something for just a specific major.
And politics affects everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
We hold difficult conversations and we host student leaders because we often find that in the programming that's available to students, it's often a little highbrow, and you have folks that maybe aren't super in touch with the way that students communicate about things or talk about the things that students want to communicate. Like a year ago, I feel like I saw a million events on AI plus insert subject, and 90% of students in that inserted subject care more about the subject than AI. So they would rather go to something about the subject than AI plus subject, right? So the idea was, get students involved in hearing difficult conversations so that we can have these difficult conversations in our own personal lives with more grace and more compassion.
We asked how their Jefferson Trust grant is helping CDI achieve its goals.
Specifically, what we've been using the grant money for from the Jefferson Trust is our Not Debate series. We have folks from different sides of an issue.
In a typical debate, you're trying to prove a point. With this, we're trying to come together to find a solution. And I think that's what politics is lacking at the moment, is people don't want to come together and find a solution.
For example, one of our most successful events was on the tariffs.
I coined the term terrific or terrifying. I thought it was really funny. People like corny, people love puns. And that's also how you get them to engage with political dialogue, if you make it kind of funny.
We had people from the Econ Club and the College Republicans come together and just discuss what we expected to happen economically from the tariffs, politically, whether or not this was a move that could be valuable on the world stage as leverage, and just discussing the merits of them, which is something that's important to do outside of a hyper-partisan, polarized environment where people can just genuinely express how they feel and do so respectfully so that people can come away from that with a deeper understanding of both sides.
I've now used this kind of template for dialogue with family members when I try to explain things to them. My grandfather, he's very conservative. I was explaining to him about the pitfalls of AI and the environmental impacts of that and the economic and socioeconomic factors when you have these huge data centers. And he usually argues with me, but we weren't arguing because we were discussing the idea and what it means for us in our context and how we could combat it together or how we could solve it together.
And even if they don't change their mind, they at least learn something along the way and can now approach a conversation with someone else about it with a bit more grace and compassion.
I think that's like what it's trying to teach people is you can do this with your friends, you could do this with your family, working with both perspectives.
What about the specific political moment do you think makes this project so necessary?
I guess I'll start with this. From a personal standpoint, I find that when I have conversations with people, whether it be family members or coworkers or friends, either they don't know really the full breadth of what's going on, or they have this very limited perspective to what's going on. And I think CDI, especially being at UVA, which is like an institution that has the privilege for these conversations to take place right now, I think CDI is very meaningful because a lot of students will come to UVA maybe not knowing a lot of things. And I feel like there's this stereotype that like UVA students are super, super smart and they know how to do this, that, and the third. At the same time, you could be really smart. You can also not know a lot about a certain subject, or you might not know about something. Say you're in the College of Arts and Sciences and they have their liberal arts curriculum. It's something that's supposed to promote this like civic duty for a citizen of a country so that they can meaningfully participate in politics. And I think in this political moment, people kind of lose that.
Was this an ongoing thing prior to getting the grant money for it, too?
In the spring of 2024, we had our first event, Not Debate, between the president of the College Republicans and University Democrats about the direction of their respective parties going into that November election, just trying to get a better sense of one another and why people were gravitating to the candidates that they were gravitating towards, and being able to discuss them and the policies with nuance instead of just divisive rhetoric.
So you're never going to agree 100% on something. And that's how we pull people for the events, is who can provide like a nuanced perspective that's also different than this person's.
How long has this been something that you've been passionate about?
As long as I can remember, really, even if I didn't know it yet, I was a debate kid in high school. If you're doing it right, you develop a passion for getting to the truth in an issue, especially because you have to research and write cases for both sides. And through that, you find certain things more useful than others. So if you're doing a research and you find a nuanced conversation between two experts, that's a lot more useful than someone being like, no, that's stupid, or just using some other type of rhetoric that's basically just straw manning the other side. And through that, I think anyone would naturally end up at the conclusion that we need to do a better job of communicating with one another, because another thing that you learn when you're doing any type of deep research into a topic is you're going to change your mind a lot throughout that process.
once you start learning about things, you're like, wow, actually everything is connected.
And when you have a part of your life where you're constantly changing your mind, it is juxtaposed with the rest of your life where you realize, I'm not changing my mind that often in the rest of my life. And you're like, well, clearly that's not because I'm right about everything. Because when I'm doing this deep research, I'm changing my mind a lot about stuff. So maybe I need to be a bit more open in my own personal life. And you kind of see that in the people around you as well. And that naturally kind of brought me to a place where I was like, yeah, I think that this is something that I want to encourage because I've found a lot of joy and excitement in changing my mind about stuff because it's awesome. It means that you just got a bit smarter. And I would say that I'm very passionate about it because of that, because I see it as one of the best feelings that a person can have, really. And the only way that you can get there or get someone else there if you really are right in the first place is by having them be open to conversation or being open to conversation yourself. And that's what the goal of this is.
What you just said is so much like the drive of libraries. There should be a lot of admiration for people who learn something and decide to make a change, and then also know that that could change.
I think that's like the most important thing is being able to admit I was wrong about this, and here's why. I mean, like one of the first pieces of news media that I remember consuming that had like a profound impact on me was Christopher Hitchens. He was the guy who was like waterboarding isn't torture. And then he got waterboarded himself as a way to test that theory. And he was like, yeah, I changed my mind on this because this is very obviously torture. I was like, wow, this guy believed something. And even though he believed it very strongly, he still went for this extent that he could to prove himself wrong. And I found that pretty admirable. And I think that's part of why I and a lot of other people are passionate about the idea of civil discourse and encouraging people to have good conversations with one another. Because if someone like Hitchens had not been open to changing his mind and had never had a good conversation with someone on the other side of that issue, never would have done that and never would have changed his mind. And in doing so, never would have changed a whole bunch of other people's minds, and advanced us closer to a shared understanding of the truth.
What is this providing to help us as we move forward into wherever our lives take us outside of universities?
It's in some ways the main pillar of what we're trying to achieve. We're at this elite university. The people here that we call classmates are also the people that are going to be the CEOs of businesses. These are the same people that are going to be the politicians making decisions, or just people who, even if they don't do those things, are still going to have significant impacts on other people's lives. And it's important for anyone who has a large impact on other people's lives to be equipped with these skills of listening and taking a step back from your own position to fairly evaluate someone else's beliefs. While it is certainly true that outside of, a more controlled environment like a university, you are going to have outside influences on why people come to a certain table to debate a topic. It still makes the most sense to approach their arguments in good faith. If I sit down at a table with an oil executive and they are expounding the benefits of fossil fuels and condemning wind turbines kill birds or whatever, right? They're arguing against a transition to clean energy. My best route of argumentation is to say, if we care about birds, maybe we should stop dumping oil in the ocean and burning fossil fuels and killing all the animals on this planet, rather than just pointing at them and saying, oh, you're a dirty oil exec and you get money from the oil industry. Because then someone who already agrees with them, who maybe doesn't get money from the oil industry, because most people don't, they can be like, well, hey, I don't get money from the oil industry and I still think this, so you haven't responded to the way I feel about this topic. And that's something that I think is pretty pervasive in our political conversations, especially as people that are in an academic institution are very quick to call out the source of someone's beliefs. Say, this belief is rooted in XYZ bad philosophies, right? Or your belief is because you went to college and you're like the liberal elites, or maybe on the other side, it's like you're influenced by your capitalist ideology or whatever. And if someone doesn't think that about themselves, then you're not even addressing them. You're not even talking to them. You're just talking to who you think they are that you've made up in your mind because either you've seen them on TV or because you think you're so highly educated that you know who they are before you've talked to them. The idea of this is we want to show people that the best way to approach any type of discussion is in good faith, and to treat others as though they're entering into a conversation with good faith until it is no longer possible to do so, of course. This stuff does transition to like the quote-unquote real world.
I
I always say what we discover through CDI is that everybody does have their critical thinking skills, but when you go out into the real world and you have conversations with people and they're more emotionally charged, I guess, you are like, wow, people don't have critical thinking skills. But I think it's the initiative to sit down and be like, okay, what's our common ground and how can we agree on something here? And how can I make you see the validity or the merit of my viewpoint rather than you categorizing me in this really polarized, stereotypical way?
At least you still have that willingness to have engaged with that person in the first place, even if it doesn't end in a good faith conversation, because you'll just understand them better. And if you really are correct about something and you are like 100% right, understanding the person that you disagree with is always going to be beneficial to you. So the way I see it is this project is about understanding, and understanding more about the world is never a bad thing.
I think that's why it's important, especially just because we see a lot of polarization and it's really, really harmful not only to our democracy and the future of our government, but it's also harmful to like our interpersonal relationships. I guess CDI is to help provide more nuance to the current political climate.
Why is it important that these events are led by students?
The importance of having these be student-led events is, first off, people know them.
Having it be your peers rather than a professor, it makes people feel like, I know these people. Like, I could see her walking through grounds. Like, she could be in my class. That's really important for people to see and to know. It's not lost in that people do care about trying to create political dialogue and foster that environment.
So it's not just a faceless person who believes in pro-life, person who is pro-choice. It's that guy from my English class. And that humanizes people and makes it more easy to approach that conversation in good faith, that you can much easier imagine yourself having that same conversation with them, A, and B, it also means that you're going in with the implicit understanding that as a student, they're here to learn. So you're less likely to treat them as if this is their like codified final belief, which of course isn't true for an adult either. These events are student-led and student-run, and we co-design the events with all of our speakers. That contributes to the success of our events. The speakers that we have at our events have significant input on what the event looks like. It's not just a, hey, can you talk here and then we'll all meet up at the same time and then we'll chat. It's the person who moderates the conversation meets up with each speaker individually about the topic to really understand where they're coming from.
Typically, because we want it to be our peers, we grab students from the universities. Christoph was vice president, so last semester, his job was to get in contact with clubs where we might have some people who would be interested and also would be able to provide a different viewpoint on something that people might think is already very black and white. It's almost like we're tokenizing political ideologies because we want it to be like, this is not a debate, like it's a discussion, but it's like we're trying to find people who might have those different viewpoints so that we can put them together and showcase them like agreeing on something, or not agreeing, but coming to find a common ground. Like you can agree to disagree, but if you can find some like relation in your viewpoints, I think that's a lot more important than being like, oh no, your points are like completely right, because everybody has their different experiences and their different moralities and et cetera, et cetera.
We asked about more topics covered in the This Is Not a Debate series.
Our last one was on the gender gap, especially focusing in like the Gen Z gender gap.
The gender divide in politics is there one. Bring in the male loneliness epidemic and why are young men shifting to the right? All these questions that are being asked constantly in the media.
I actually participated in that one, so I was on the panel, which was really interesting and very fun.
I was the moderator for that event, and I had a conversation with two of the speakers at once actually, because they were very similar. They were on, I wouldn't say different sides of the issue, but they had different perspectives on it. We talked for 2 hours long about all sorts of stuff, and they started bringing in really awesome like economic studies of manufacturing jobs and where manufacturing jobs are going and what the impact is on different populations. And it was very, first off, impressive. Like, hey, these are my classmates, and like they know all this really cool stuff. But also, it made it so that we could design the event around what they believed. And so I knew what questions to ask, or if someone said something that I knew was going to be, counter to what someone else believed, I could just look at them and then they would start speaking because they know that this is where we're going. So having not just students speaking, but having students help design the conversation itself makes it flow a lot easier. You don't get people talking past each other, and you have really interesting and engaging conversations as a result of it.
Have you heard any feedback, like this last semester, from the audience or people who listened?
A lot of people have said, like, why don't you guys actually do a debate? It's basically a debate. But I feel like they're missing the point. We got a couple Yik Yak posts. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like, we're doing something good, because somebody posted and we were like, okay, people are engaged. Like, that's what matters. I think that a lot of people have come up to me and been like, Sabriya, that was really fun to watch, because people get a little sassy, but in the end, we still can agree or agree to disagree. We're not here to do a performative debate. We're here to do performative political dialogue. It has to be done in front of an audience. Body language tells so much, and you have these people who are political opposites and they're coming together and they're having this conversation, whereas I think a lot of times online and on social media you see people being like, I would never speak to a Republican, or I would never speak to a liberal, blah, 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 because they just don't agree with me intrinsically. And that's cool and fine and all, but it's creating this professional setting to have the political dialogue. I feel like it's a lot different than the debates I've watched college students do, and I think it's a lot different than the debates I've watched political candidates do, where they're trying to tear each other down and they're trying to prove that their morality is better. With CDI, it is much more discussion-based, and we don't really go at each other's throats.
We asked why more political candidate debates didn't use the same process.
I feel like they used to. People are now trying to create like personality cults around political candidates. Not only do you have to be better than your opponent on policy, you just have to be more engaging, and you have to be able to garner more support from the public. There's a loss of respectability politics, which some people would say that's a good thing, but then that makes us more polarized if we're like, all these people are bad, we should be mean to them. Why are we bullying each other, guys? We're grown. Like, why are we bullying each other?
How else can students get involved with this?
We have an Instagram. It's at Civil Discourse Initiative.
You can just shoot us a DM. We're pretty responsive.
We're on LinkedIn. It's also just Civil Discourse Initiative. We have a group me also in the link tree of our Instagram. We flyer a lot, and all of our events have free food. That's what we use the grant money for, is free food, because we always do it in the evenings, and college students love free food. We're all pretty friendly people. Like, we're all happy to talk. There's a picture of us on our Instagram. If you see any of us on ground, be like, oh my gosh, you're in the Civil Discourse Initiative? Wait, can I talk to you about this? Because the thing is, it's like our exec predominantly recommends the ideas, but one thing we wanted to implement this semester was like a general body meeting where we have people who are interested in the club and are like attending the events to come recommend ideas of what we could do, because it's student-led but also student-run. We want to be democratic with it.
I want to give a huge shout out to Jack Siegel. He was the president last year. He's the guy who founded the group. Just a guy with an idea, brought in a bunch of friends and some folks he thought, you know, would have a passion for this, and we made something pretty cool out of it. Shout out to everyone else that helped build this thing. It's work to, you know, build up a club. And you don't think it's like, well, it's just like a college club. Like, how hard can it be, you know? But then you actually have to do it, and you're like, okay, yeah, now I have to get all these like 10 people that are very busy and have full schedules, because we're all students that do a lot of stuff in the same room at the same time. And just that on its own is something. And then being able to have that conversation be productive once you have 10 people in the room. So big thanks to everyone who helped build this project. Thank you to all of our speakers that have spoken at events. And thank you to everyone who showed up to them. See if we're hosting an event and stop by. It's a lot of fun.
Everything's political. So there's not really a limit to what we can talk about, but we want to make it topical and relevant to people, and not ideas that feel really polarized in black and white. Though I would say that not all ideas are polarized in black and white, and that the more you talk about it, the more you can find the common ground.
Pilot Projects, Stories from the Jefferson Trust is a Sound on Grounds podcast. Sound on Grounds is sponsored by a Jefferson Trust grant, as are all the projects featured in this season of Pilot Projects. You can find more Sound on Grounds podcasts at www.virginiaaudio.com/soundongrounds. Today's episode was engineered, recorded, written, and edited by Sarah Bastinelli and me, Jason Evans Groth, in the UVA, Clemens Library, Robertson Media Center audio studio. The Pilot Project show cover was designed by UVA alum Carina Velocci. Original music used in this episode was written and recorded by me, Jason Evans Groth, in the Robertson Media Center audio studio. Thanks to Sabriya, Sheikh, and Christoph Schoer for sharing their stories with us.